Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we're doing another R&R video, my bi-monthly reviews and ratings episode, where I go through all the different games I've played in the past 2 weeks with friends, family, and even solo. Today I'm going to be talking about 11 different games. I played 15 different ones, but we're talking about 11 of them. 4 of them I talked about on previous R&Rs, so I'm not going to talk about them again. So let's get to our very first game of this week, which is Decktective Bloody Red Roses. Decktective Bloody Red Roses is a mystery-solving game wrapped up into a single deck of 50 playing cards for 1 to 6 players, which I went through this solo, which took about 30 minutes. You are going to be looking at these cards, which are labeled 1 through 50, and you are going to go through them from top to bottom to try and solve the mystery of a death. The cards are going to give you little clues about what happened and who was around. You can place some cards on the table as evidence, or you can place them face down for no one to see, which will give you what is essentially more buying power to place cards face up for everyone to see. Playing this solo, though, you obviously get to see all of the cards. I enjoyed this, but it gets a 6 rating from me since I'm not sure it's worth the 15 to 20 bucks for a short one-time playthrough game, since I obviously shouldn't play this game again since I know the outcome of everything. But it is one that I'll gladly give to another person for them to go through the mystery as well. So the 6 rating is simply because paying 20 bucks for a filler type one-time playthrough game isn't financially viable for myself. Moving on to a solo game, Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden. Mr. Cabbagehead's Garden is a small filler card game designed for solo play, but you can play 2 players, but I haven't tried out that variant yet, so this is simply for the solo game. In this game, you'll be building up your garden full of different vegetables in order to present an award-winning garden by the end of the 3rd round. You will be drafting cards to place into your garden, which will have the dimensions of a 6x3 grid. You want to place the same vegetables next to each other in order to score points, but you can also score points by winning awards for other ways that you lay out your garden. At the end of each round, a neighbor will come and steal some vegetables and disrupt your plans. I had a good time playing this game, giving it a 7 rating, and it only takes 10 to 15 minutes to play, and it is one of those games that if you break it out, you will end up playing it 2 or 3 times in a row, just trying to beat your own score. Let's check out the next game that I'm a little less pleased with in Outpost Amazon. Outpost Amazon is a cooperative game where you and your team are trying to make it through a jungle that is full of nasty monster-type creatures. Your goal is to ultimately have your crew survive through the deck of cards that will have good events, bad events, and those bad monsters. You'll be drawing cards each turn to help you do a variety of things like hitting the creatures, healing up, food and water cards, and also nets to help capture some of these creatures. If you do happen to survive through the deck, your team's score will depend on the creatures you have captured. I am only giving this game a 4 rating. The card play and choices you have can be interesting, but first off, I found the rulebook to be quite bad for such a simple little game. That, and to pair it with some of the cards that I couldn't quite figure out exactly how they worked, is very problematic. And I don't mean to keep on beating this game, but a lot of the events just don't even make much sense and doesn't seem to have been playtested. So this is a game I saw a lot of potential with, but I can't recommend it. But if you are looking for a similar game with similar theme, I would recommend the solo game, The Lost Expedition. Quickly going on to the next one now, Lost Cities Roll and Write. Okay, time for the roll and write version of one of my favorite games, Lost Cities. In this roll and write, the active player will roll the dice, which 3 dice have colors and 3 dice have numbers. The player then chooses a pair of dice combining the color of one dice and the number of the other. The other dice are left for the other players to choose from. You will mark off your sheet the numbers you took on that color's track. You have to mark your tracks off in either equal to or ascending order. You will score points for however high you get onto these tracks and get bonuses for being the first player to cross certain thresholds. This is a very simple game, simple teach, and it gets a 5.5 rating from me. Lost Cities is a great 2-player only strategic game, where this roll and write version is a giant luck fest of a game that solely relies on you rolling the correct numbers and colors of the dice. I was pretty disappointed in this game, and I would never pull this version out instead of the original, but maybe if you hadn't played the original and only played this, you would have a different perspective on it. Now going on to Pandemic Contagion. Pandemic Contagion is a game in the Pandemic series. Unlike all the other games in the series, this is not a cooperative game, but instead a competitive hand management, area control, sort of engine building game. You are also playing as the virus in this one instead of trying to stop the virus. Your goal is to infect more people than the other players. On your turn, you take 2 actions, which can be gathering more cards, infecting cities, or discarding cards to improve your abilities. Whenever a city has reached so many cubes, whoever has the most will receive a majority of the points it's worth. Play continues until there are only a couple cities remaining. I give this game a 7.5 rating, and I actually just did a video where I ranked all of the Pandemic games if you'd like to check that out. Time to talk about a classic game now, Catan. I played Catan again for the first time in a while. Catan was my first board game I had played besides like the Monopoly-esque kind of games. I played it a bunch in my middle school and high school days. In this game, you'll be rolling dice to gather up resources and build things like roads and settlements. Everyone will get resources if numbers are rolled that they have settlements by, which is always nice when games let you get something when it's not your turn. All your settlements and cities will be worth so many points along with a few other things. Once a player has 10 points, they win. This game has dropped down to a 6 rating for me, but I did play with the Cities and Knights expansion this time, which would probably bring up that rating by 0.5 or even 1. Moving on to a small card game, Floriferous. Floriferous is another game in the Pencil First series of games with a very calm, nature-based theme. In Floriferous, you are going to be sort of drafting these flower cards by placing your pawn on a card of a column and taking that card. In the next round, whoever has their pawn on the very top of the column goes first and places their pawn on a card in the next column. So your placement will determine the turn order for the next round, which is a very similar drafting mechanic as King Domino. In that column of cards will also be scoring cards you can draft, which will give you points for a variety of things you have collected after 3 rounds. There will also be scoring objective cards put up top for everyone to score on. But the sooner you complete those objectives, the more points you will score. I was expecting an easygoing, not much to think about game, kind of like the game Herbaceous was in this series. But there is a lot going on in this beautifully packaged game. I'm giving this a solid 7 rating, and unlike Herbaceous, which I said was a better solo game than multiplayer game, this I think is a better multiplayer game, but the solo game is still nicely done as well. On to another card game, The Blood of an Englishman. The Blood of an Englishman is a 2-player only asymmetric card game with the theme of the fairy tale Jack and the Beanstalk. One player plays as Jack, whereas the other assumes the role of the giant. There are cards lined up into 3 different columns randomly each game. The cards are either numbered, have treasure on them, or is a fee-fi-fo-fum card. Jack is trying to collect all the treasures by putting cards into ascending order onto a beanstalk. The giant is trying to put the fee-fi-fo-fum cards in a certain pattern. Each role in this game is going to be able to move around and manipulate the cards in different ways to accomplish their goals. I'm giving this game a 6.5 rating. When I first played this game a couple years ago, I thought it was really neat, and it is. I just don't think it's a game you're going to think of too often after you have played it about 10 times. So I enjoyed it, but I think it's time for this game to leave my collection and give to another person to discover this quirky little game. On to a game with a bigger footprint, Dice City. Dice City is a dice placement, resource management, engine building game where you start with a basic board of actions. I only have played this game solitaire, so I'm only talking about this game in the solo mode. On your turn, you roll all of your colored dice and place them on the colored row and the column of the number you rolled. You can use that die to perform that spot's action, or you can remove it to move another die on a different row 1 space. A lot of the spaces will give you resources, which will allow you to buy better cards to put onto your board. Other spaces will let you get military power, which you can use to defeat bandits to score points. At the end of 15 rounds, the game is over, and you score points for the bandits you defeated and the different buildings you have built. I did play this game with a small expansion called All That Glitters, which just adds a couple more cards, which I think should have just been included in the main game. I'll give this game a solo rating of 6.5 because I did enjoy it, but it did become kind of obvious to me to just go heavily into military and score the majority of your points that way, which that always hurts a rating for me when I think there is one path that is better than the others in a game. But still a solid game that is pretty quick solo experience in about a half an hour. Keeping it going now with the Red Cathedral. The Red Cathedral is this small box Euro style game where the theme is we are architects competing against each other, trying to be the best builder of this giant cathedral we are building. You will need to get resources in order to build your parts of the cathedral, and you will do that by moving around these dice that are on this wheel-looking main board. You will choose one of the dies and move it around that wheel as far as however many pips are showing on that die, and then you will collect the resources that it landed on and then re-roll all the dice in that section. There are also special powers that region or even that specific dice's color can activate. You will bring those resources over to the church and start constructing your sections. Whoever collects the most points from the buildings at the end wins. First the bad. I played this solo to begin with, and the AI you play against just feels stagnant and lifeless, and how well it does really depends on the random setup it gets at the beginning of the game. But still, I enjoyed my part of it, but the solo AI I thought wasn't the best. But the multiplayer game in this I feel is really good with hard, interesting choices to make. I will give this game a solo rating of 6, and the multiplayer rating gets a 7.5. This is a game I definitely would suggest to anyone who loves Euro-style games, but if you're looking just for a solo mode game, I would pass on this one. Now onto a game that you're definitely going to need a bigger table for, which is Smartphone Inc. I got Smartphone Inc. off my shelf of shame this week with a few solitaire plays, so this is purely a solitaire review. The theme of this game is you are a company expanding across the globe selling phones. You will have these two boards full of different symbols that you will overlap them, and the symbols left showing will give you certain resources and actions. There are 5 rounds, and each round has 8 phases in which you will manipulate your action boards around, set your phone prices, get your inventory, gaining new action boards, improving technologies, expanding your company, then deciding where to sell your phones, and finally collecting the money. By the end of the game, you have spread out your company and are making some big bucks. I enjoyed this game solo, giving it a 7 rating, but I'm really excited to try this as a multiplayer game, as I now have some pretty high expectations for this game. And that will wrap up this R&R video. What do you guys think of some of these games I played this week? Have you played some? Have you not that you want to check out? Or did you play them and you had different thoughts of me? Or maybe you did agree with me. Either way, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. Hope you all have an amazing day. Take care, everyone.